Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Design Cinema. This is Feng Zhu speaking, and we are continuing our sci-fi series. Except today, we are actually doing the real demo, or at least showing you guys the process we use in the studio to approach these projects. So we'll be taking Old Man's War, this novel here, and try to do a pretend project of how we approach it if this book was going to turn into a film or a, say, television series. So, and I'll go through what my job today is in the studio, because I've moved from being a concept artist more into a production designer / producer on the shows that we currently take. Some of you guys might be doing the same thing once you reach my age, in which you build up a lot of experience, and that experience is better served in doing the early stage planning, the idea gathering, and then you work with the team to realize those ideas. So the pipeline I'll be showing you guys today is exactly what we do in the current studio for other films. So of course this is all pretend, and we did it in a very quick process. So down here I actually wrote that normally a real pipeline on a film will take anywhere from 3 to 9 months, depending on the scope. But of course, this is a demo for YouTube, so we have only 1 week to put together everything, all the references, all the paintings, everything you guys will see. So this will be broken down to 2 parts actually. I'll have the second part of the concepts showcased in part 4 of this series. Okay. Let's first jump into Old Man's War in terms of the synopsis. Just in case you guys haven't read the book, I need to go over that, so otherwise the design wouldn't make any sense. So the core of the book is about once you turn 75 years old, go beyond 75, you could then sign up to join the Earth Defense Force, this military, and they send you out into space to find aliens and protect human colonies from all sorts of wars and so forth. The benefit of that is that they will return your body back to a young age, for example, 20-something from 75-something, but they transfer your experience, your mind of a 75-year-old into this younger body. The bad side is that, of course, you could die in the war, and also you can never return back to Earth again. So that's sort of the synopsis of the book, and we follow a lead character named John as he leaves Earth and prepares to join battle and turn his body into younger form. So I love the way this book is written. It's fairly new, but the ideas and sort of the iconic designs, I guess, from it is I could tell he's basing it off of classic sci-fi books such as Starship Troopers, in which the author has referred to many times in his blog. So I love that kind of book. I love old school sci-fi. Uses very kind of a hardcore military and that type of things. So I'll go through that as we get into design. Okay, so that's sort of the synopsis of the book. So let me jump in and explain the first part, which is my role on this particular project, okay, on this demo as well, is that I'll be setting the overall direction. I'll be creating a design board, which I'll be showing you, creating the mood board for designers, and of course find the anchor. But let me explain these first. So why do we need to do this in the studio? Okay, so for some of you guys who are students, I think most of our YouTube listeners are students, so you guys can see a little bit behind the scenes of how a bigger project takes place. So when you're dealing with a big project like a film, there are many designers involved, anywhere from say 3 to possibly 10 designers. So you gotta get everyone on board the same direction early on. You could try to explore, right? In the ideal world, you give every designer, like you try this, you try this, you try that. That's in the ideal utopian world. But in the real world, that means burning money with possible no results, right? For example, you have 10 designers and you give everyone something to do for a week. You might get 10 different ideas, but maybe 8 of them don't work, or it's not to the vision of the director. And then you try another week, and then suddenly starting to refine something. But that's 3 weeks, 10 artists burning a lot of money. So in the real world, my job really is try to get the film into a certain direction early on, and by for example, meeting with directors, producers, and we set the goal. So we don't stray too far from that. So once we have a meeting with the designers, everyone on board has a general purpose of where this idea is going to. So as a student designer, this is something important for you to learn as well, is that our job really is for the goal of the project, of the film or the game you're working on. It's not your personal thing. Of course, we'll add personal flavors into designs, your own styling and so forth. But overall, our job is to serve the purpose of the film, its overall vision that the directors and producers and so forth come up with. Okay, so what is this anchor? Well, this anchor is the same thing that a ship drops, right? It weighs the project down. And this could be in the form of anything. It could be a shape, it could be a color, it could be a certain identification. And what this anchor does is it gives you a starting point. We might eventually move away from this anchor, but having an anchor puts everybody on the same team, so on the same design language. So you're not going to get a designer who just goes completely off course and go in the direction that the director don't want, right? So my job really is to try to provide that early on so my team has something to start with, and we'll morph designs as we go from there. And I also do some rough designs here and there. If I have an idea that I really like in my head, then instead of just trying to describe it, I will draw some quick sketches. And I'll be showing you all these very soon. So then my FCD creative team, they take over after we have these meetings, brainstorm sessions, and bounce a bunch of ideas. And we have these directions set. Then they jump in and start doing the reference gathering, the rough sketches, and bounce back ideas, and then complete the final pieces. So in this demo, I'm not showing you any of these. I'm showing you only the final pieces because I've done plenty of design cinema showing the process of doing the actual concept design. This is more about the design themselves, okay? So like I mentioned, these kind of things take 3 to 9 months in the real world, but for this demo purpose, we have 1 week to prepare all the stuff in it. So let's jump into the first one here, which is this. Yeah, that's the first image. So I want to create a contrast board. So this is not a reference board, okay? This is not the actual images to use, but sometimes you can, but the core purpose of this is to create the mood that I want. Let me turn off this one here. Okay. So since this book is called Old Man's War, there's a nice contrast already in the title of this project, which is Old War, right? Wars are generally fought by younger generations. So that's a nice contrast. So let's use that as a starting point for the design. So if this film opens up, I want it to feel really not sci-fi at all. I want to feel it's been around for a few hundred years. It's very rural. It's very classic kind of America. The book opens up in Ohio. That's where this John Perry guy lives. So instead of adding sci-fi, making it into say a futuristic city, use of flying cars and so forth, we don't do that. We're going to save that for later. That way we could build a very nice contrast between this world. Okay, let me go to full screen here, between this world and this world. So I want something that feels comfortable. The farmhouses, the trees, the grass, everything is nice and warm, right? Warm versus cool. So why do we do this? Because that way, when we actually go into this part of the world, it has a stronger contrast. Imagine we start the world already sci-fied out and flying spaceships everywhere. And then we go here, it's also flying spaceships, except we're in space. Well, it might bore the audience, and it makes both lose its potential. Versus we start the film, say the guy is making coffee in the morning with an old coffee maker and drinking on the porch and so forth. And it just feels like everything's normal. There might be a small hint of science fiction with maybe a car, maybe his phone, but otherwise the world is pretty similar to the world we live in today. So once he travels to the space station and prepares for the transformation of his body, then we see things that are very, very high tech. Okay, so warm, and of course old versus young. So for example, this is where he starts and he'll end up being here. A quick mention of the actor. I like to pick an actor that I feel fits the role of the project I'm on. That may not even be the actual cast. Oftentimes when you work on a film, the casting is not done until maybe a year into the project, for example. So oftentimes what I like to do is at least get somebody I think will fit the role, because that also helps with design, because certain actors carry with them a certain persona. So some actors, like say Ben Stiller, carries an overall comedic background, right? So you put Ben Stiller in a sci-fi film, well, the sci-fi film is gonna swing a little bit into the comedy side, probably, right? So that's gonna help my designers also know the direction of the film. For example, Chris over here, he's got this kind of just cool, hip, very in today type of thing. So he's a good cast if you want this film to feel kind of like a fun ride, right? So he'll be a good cast, and this will help define the I guess the overall feel of the project. So anyways, this is something I put together for my designers. Generally, we print this out and we talk about it in the meeting. So there's no design reference per se here. This is more for the feel, the color palette, and so forth that I want. So this is the army recruiting station, right? Like a strip mall. So no sci-fi, even though this is taking place in the far future, purposely no sci-fi. And I'll show you guys what the final designs look like later. Okay. Next is Now, this is something that we didn't do much on this particular project because, again, it was a demo. But something that we do on real projects, which is we take the script and we break it down to a bunch of different paintings. For example, if we follow the classic Hollywood act breakdown, we have 1, 2, and 3, with your midpoint being somewhere around 45 minutes. So we take these and generally break it down anywhere from 12 to about 20 so production paintings, and each one happens at an important moment of the film. And therefore, that allows us to kind of plan the entire film out in terms of the overall mood and temperature and color palette and lighting of the entire project. So that way, if you're working with a team of designers and someone's working on shot 2, someone's on shot 6 and shot 10, for example, we already have from early on some kind of planning. So you don't get back randomness from these projects, right? So again, the more designers, the more important it is to get this going. But of course, some of you guys might be saying, hey, that kind of limits the designers. Yes, that's true to a certain extent, but you also got to think these are all products. In the beginning, you might have some brainstorming sessions in which everyone's doing whatever they want, but that can only go for so long. It all depends on how much budget and time you have on these projects. Because if you're tight on schedule and money, you don't have the luxury of doing this for a very long time. Okay, so this is my quick color palette breakdown showing sort of the start. I want it to be nice and warm, very home-like, very earth, because this is the last time John Perry is going to be on this planet. So we're going to build this very classical suburbia kind of feeling, and then we'll move into very cold space. Everything's modern, everything's new, and of course we'll probably end up in some battle and use some reds and so forth. This is a pretty standard palette, but we'll start from here, and as we get the project going, we will morph it as we go. And personally, I like to bookend my palettes. So bookend, I like to generally do a flip bookend. So the movie might start with a sunrise with John Perry making a coffee in his little farmhouse, and then maybe the film will end on him looking at a lake on some foreign alien planet, and it's got reflections of a sunset or something. So we got an opposite flip color. That's my personal taste. So directors sometimes will have their own vision of how they want to bookend their films. Okay, but it gives us something to get started. All right, next, anchor point. So the anchor point could be anything. Okay, for this particular project, I started looking for shapes, like something to get you started. Most IPs have some kind of anchor. Basically, it could be sometimes called selling point. It could be the design language itself. It could be anything. It could be a color palette. So it's basically something to get you started versus, again, doing random things. Like I'm just going to draw generic buildings and generic spaceships. That's not going to sell anything because we've seen that too many times, especially in films. In games, you get away with a little bit because games has gameplay and it has all sorts of different elements on top of it. But film, really, you just have this one visual, right? You have the story, you have the visual. So there's no gameplay. Everything's controlled by the director. So it's very important to find your own vision for this particular film, so it stands out among the crowd. So we have to find this anchor point. So for this project, I looked at a few things. One, the book itself, Old Man's War, talks about regeneration, right? Once you turn old, you become young again. In the classic circle of kind of our life, we are born, we are toddlers, we go to teens and then adult, and then you turn really old, and you're like bedridden, and then you go into the grave, right? And that's sort of the circle. But in this particular book, the circle goes from old man and goes right back to being young again. So it kind of skips the middle part and makes another circle. So I go, hey, that's kind of interesting. We got 2 circles in a row, right? That could be an interesting shape. What else do we have? Well, we have a militarized book, right? It's called Old Man's War. So what is war? So I decided not to look at modern war, but look at ancient wars. Where did it start? In ancient wars, shields and swords are your primary kind of weapons for thousands of years. So this is a very strong shape. Swords are a very strong shape. So I'll show you guys how I use these designs in the second part, or the fourth part, I guess, of the series, how I work that into the spaceships. For this episode, we'll work on these first. But notice a shield also has circular shapes, which I like. Okay, and in wars, blood cells, right? Blood's lost. I started looking at cells. This is actually something my designers came up with as well. We started looking for these anchor points, and blood cells have a round circle, right? This whole circle of life thing being you turn old and back to young again. The circle seems to be a pretty strong shape, and that's starting to give us an anchor point. And same with this little embryo here. Now I put this here because in this book, this part here basically gets intercepted. The old man turns back to a young man again, right? Or an old lady turns to a young lady again. But we skip this stage. So I want to somehow work this back into a sci-fi design. So we're not being reborn, we're being recloned. But can I use this metaphor, right? This kind of membranes and this lighting and so forth. And can we get this look to come out? And these are all things I'm sharing with my design team to see can we use design to achieve that, okay? And lastly, since I was dealing with circles, we're also dealing with infinity, right? Because essentially you go on forever. And the book actually mentions a little bit of that. Like you turn old again, you could do this again. You turn old again, you could do this again. Essentially, you could live for many, many generations using this technology. So that means there's infinity involved. So a circle with infinity in 3D sort of gives me this donut shape. And that's where my anchor point for this project started. And all this is given to my designers. We have meetings about this and we start producing concept art from that. So the last one I'll show you are these rough drawings that I do. So for example, the space elevator. For John Perry to go to the space station, they actually go through a space elevator first to go to a space station that's outside of Earth. From there, they board a transport ship that takes you to a complete different galaxy, I think, and then they do the operation to turn you into a young person. So this is my kind of the idea based off the book as well of what this donut shape could be as they go up and leave Earth. And I want this to look really, really pretty because they're very high tech. The book actually mentions this, that the technology is so advanced that you actually have no idea how it works. So I want to avoid the Terran design, which is the 45-degree, super military, super kind of Earth military Terran look. We've seen that many times, so I want to try a different take on it, which is this kind of circular, fluid, smooth, kind of sports car type of approach to it. So, and very, very pretty because this, again, is the last time John's going to see his home planet before he leaves forever. So here's sort of a cutaway shot of what that donut could look like with the string in the middle. Here are some of my roughs for the actual embryo, or not the embryo metaphor, but taken to the lab where the old guy transferred his mind into a younger body. So I started with these egg shapes. Look at the shark egg sac. Here's a little baby elephant. So I thought the outer container could be a circular semi-transparent dome to emulate an egg, right? Eggs reborn, right? Same thing, has to do with life. And then once you're inside, we have this embryonic design, very similar to the reference images from this little baby here. In which the old guy sits over here and then his mind transferred to a younger version himself. The young man might come in these kind of packages that look like these hard drives. So when he's born again, he has a very similar to a birth of a real person, right? So here's my little designs of these little guys wrapped in. So again, these are pretty quick. We have 1 week essentially to design all this. So in the real world, we have a lot more time to go through this and refine and refine, refine. So design is going to be whatever you see is basically 1 week's worth of work. So hopefully, it's cool enough for you to understand this process. But obviously, in the real world, we could actually tweak these way beyond. And here are some notes that I've done, which I'll show you after I show you the final drawings. And this is the little hallway, sort of where the cloning, where the rebirth is happening. So our little eggs, right? And this is really emulating this shark egg here. So let me take a sip of coffee because I'm speaking super quick again. All right. Whoa, almost spilled my coffee here. Okay, let's jump into to the actual finishes. So this is sort of what I do. Of course, on the real work, on the real job, I do a lot more than just 1 page of these things. I typically do for every important scene, I do one of these. So we end up about 12 to 20 of these reference boards. And then for example, these reference sheets I do. So I provide a ton of these for my team. So that way everyone on board can understand. Okay, let's open up some of the stuff my team actually accomplished. So these are all done by Min and Charles from the FCD design team. So let's first show you the recruiting station. Okay, so here's John Perry's home in Ohio. So again, we talked about not mentioning too much sci-fi in this scene on purpose. So, and Min put in some really cool design elements here. For example, he's all alone. His wife has passed away. So he's getting old. He's got nothing left. All his sons and daughters and so forth are already on their own. So it's kind of this old man in rural America. Nothing's going on. And that's what makes him want to join the military, right? So Min put this really cool design, which you have a house, very standard, but one of the room is lit while the rest of the house is darkened. So it really starts to reinforce the idea of him being by himself and very lonely. You have one guy sitting here on his little lawn chair here, just one dude staring at the last sunset before he leaves Earth for the final time. So very sentimental kind of scene, no sci-fi, with a tiny bit of like maybe wind generators, maybe some roof tiles, and maybe he installed this like 30, 40 years ago. It's still there, right? So I purposely want to do that instead of having, say, flying cars and giant space stations in the back and so forth. None of that. So that way our audience ease into the scene nice and slow, got birds chirping, the wind's blowing, the sun is about to set, just this very quiet, serene life that John's living, making him a coffee, right, eating on the lawn, drinking tea or so forth, and just feels like normal life. And that way, when the film kicks into the sci-fi, we have beautiful contrast. Okay, let's look at the next one here. So this is a recruiting station, so same thing. I want our designers here to approach it from a very low budget, like everything is exactly the same. There's no sci-fi elements. There might be a tiny bit of sci-fi, but it looks like a standard office and all these old people, right? Because that's interesting. It's like all these older grandmas and grandpas at a recruiting station, right? All the fonts are like all standard, like you see in a senior home or something, right? That's done on purpose. All these chairs, none of it is sci-fi. Because I think that'll make the film more interesting. Little hint at the space station that come up later, but for now, just very standard. So this way the audience will also be hooked. They'll be watching the film going, wait, I thought I'm watching a crazy sci-fi film. Sci-fi film, why is this stuff so earthy, right? That's gonna make it cooler later. Okay, here's another recruiting, so it's flipped. Okay. So same thing, different take, similar design with the sun's coming in. So imagine it's the next morning. He's like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna leave Earth. I'm gonna sign up for this crazy program that turns me into a young soldier. So the morning sun just shining through. He saw this last sunset the night before. So this is it. This is the last day of him on planet Earth, right? And all these old dudes sitting around. Okay, let's load up the next batch, which is the space elevator up to the space station itself. Let me load those up, which are these here. All right, so let's first look at the space elevator. Min here did a lot of paintings in a short amount of time. So of course we could refine these and so forth, but for the first pass for 1 week's of design, I'm pretty happy with the directions. And then of course on a real project, this will be week 1. We have 5-6 months to tweak these things. So, but you can see the general idea of the double ring showing up, which is mimic the blood cell, mimic the double ring of life. So this is the space elevator that takes them up. The elevator itself is shaped like a donut. Okay, so super pretty. Super high-tech, super clean, so it's not military. And the book actually describes that. The book said that these places are very, very high-tech, very clean. They don't have, they don't want to scare you off. They want to have a very good experience. They mentioned the food is awesome. They have really good meals, right? You have all these basically senior citizens everywhere. And that creates, I think, a very interesting contrast in this film. It's like all these old people walking around this very high-tech world. And then, of course, right now we're entering the upper atmosphere of the Earth. So last time they see Earth, and maybe these are some special displays that shows like how their altitude and so forth. Just some high-tech stuff going on the screen here. Huge windows, like you're in a very high sky rise. It's just a beautiful scene, very quiet. We probably have some 2001 like music going on over here as we leave our home planet for the last time. So here's some other donuts that's going up this space elevator as well. So I love this scene, looks really cool. I'll show you an earlier version of this that Min did here, which is somewhere around here. Let me load it up. Where is it? Here it goes. All right, this is an early attempt, but I thought this one looks still a little bit too military. It has too many of these kind of things, these 9 degrees 45s. So I had all these removed and you saw the newer version just now, right? Because I thought these things look too industrial. Let's make this stuff more pretty, because we have plenty of time to do this later. Okay, when they enter the space, when they get into battles and so forth, we could do these everywhere. But for now, let's have some transitional points, some different areas, so the audience is entertained throughout the movie versus showing them everything in the first 5 minutes. Let's ease it in. So this is a earlier design of the space elevator. So here's the final one again. Okay, very quiet, super smooth, very kind of space opera lighting. Okay, and I also had our designer here kick up the saturation. So I want this film to feel more rich in color, so it's not this deep blue, dark sci-fi. Okay. And then once I get to the space elevator, let's load up, the space station above. So here's the station. You can see the donuts rising up here on these strings. So here's one of the donuts about to dock. So here's a little door. So they dock, and then all the recruits get off here. I think they stay here for a few days, and then the transport ship will come, pick them up. So they stay here, go into here, and then go on the transport, and the transport ship leaves and basically warps to another galaxy. So this is the design for the Warpital Station that's above Earth. So it's in geosynchronous orbit. The book actually didn't mention exactly where it was above Earth, but let's see here. We have two of these. Where's the other one? Here it is. All right, so here's a different view, another design of it, slightly different in its concept, but similar feel. So very clean, very high tech. Oh, my Photoshop is freaking out again. Here we go. Something I just want to go into full screen, as you can see. Oh, here we go. Okay. So that's this one, with some of the drop ships flying in. Just very quiet, very grand, very simple in its form language. All right, with the space elevator going all the way down to Earth. Here's a bottom view from Earth looking up with the light of the Earth hitting the bottom of its design here. Some earlier designs of the donut and how that works. Here's the other view of that. And one more view from bottom up. So all these paintings, hold on a second, let me close this because it's freaking out my Photoshop. Okay. All these could be refined as time goes forward. So, but this is generally how we start these projects, that we do mood boards, reference boards, and then we start generating early stage concepts. Okay, let's load up the last batch, which is the transformation station. Let's load up that, which is this one and this one. Okay, boom, boom. All right. So here's the early stage of one of the bubbles that has the aging process going on. So very simple design. This is my own personal taste for this particular IP. Like when I read the book, that's how I saw it. I didn't see it as this kind of very heavy military looking place like Alien or say Halo, right? That's like everything 45 degrees. I saw it as a very refined design. Everything's clean. You don't see wires. You don't see air vents. You don't see any of this. Everything just nice and clean. So these little bubbles, each one represents like the shark egg, and you can see the silhouette of the people inside, okay, like eggs. And then the new bodies are being wheeled in. And then here's one of the stations in which the old man's mind is transferred into the younger body of himself. So the old man sits down, the doctor presses some buttons, and then his mind is transferred this one. So here's a design of the kind of the bag that it comes out from. Here's some very simple UI. So rooms like this will go through many revisions on a real project because this is a major selling point for the film. But I'm happy with the first round of where this is at. But of course, this could be tweaked many times until we reach the final design. So design works that way. Designs evolve over time. So this will be generation number 1. Some designs go through generation 10, 20, 30 before they're actually chosen for the final production. So because the films like this is selling these ideas, these rooms. So you got to really put a lot of thought into them. So I'll show you some early gray models. So here's some early gray models that men here did in 3D. I think this is in Modo. So different designers use different techniques. Some use SketchUp, some use Modo, some straight out sketch it. It doesn't matter, but generally I take a look at them very early on to make sure the design language is about correct. And then we approve that design and it goes into a next stage of production. I'll show you some early costume layouts as well. Okay. So, for example, for John Perry on Earth, there's not much design at all. We just want him to look normal, like an old dude. And we give him a red shirt to kind of represent the last time his own blood is within himself before he goes to a new body. So, very old shoes and an old watch, and a wallet's been around for 50 years, with the younger version of himself in there and his wife and kids. And pretty much no sci-fi. Everything's just normal. Maybe a slightly sci-fi watch, but otherwise very normal, and that's on purpose. And then when he gets onto the station, he's still old. This is before he changes to a young man. Give him a slightly sci-fi'd out sort of outfit. And these designs are not refined yet. I think this could be maybe a circle or something like that over time. But the idea here is to give some heart readings and so forth so the doctors could see their visual clues very far away. And in turn, the audience could see that as well. So here's some early costumes for that. So yeah, so that's what we did here. So this is this pipeline you're seeing here is very typical of what we do on real projects. So films are quite different than games. Games, you'll do a lot more concept than this. Films, you're really just going scene per scene and trying to refine and get the idea down as early as you can. So on the projects we're on now, we're using the same exact process. I get the reference photos and make these design sheets, and we talk it over with our designers, and then we start generating concept art like what you see here. So hopefully this is helping some younger designers see what this pipeline is like out there. So it's hard work, it requires a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, and especially with a project like this, you can't do what I call generic sci-fi, which is a bunch of cities and a bunch of flying spaceships. That stuff is really fun to paint, but it's very hard to use on IPs that have very specific languages. So, and hopefully that also shows you that especially for a student, you want to enter this line of work, you got to be very good at researching and opening your mind and looking at all sorts of reference images and all sorts of design styles and languages that's out there, versus just painting cool spaceships flying around in spiky mountain cities or something, right? So next week, I will actually show you guys the space stations and spaceships and so forth that we designed. There's another probably maybe 6 or 7 paintings or so forth in there. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you guys in the final episode part 4, in which we wrap this whole sci-fi thing up. So thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like our videos. This is Feng Zhu speaking, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.